Welcome to week 6. This week we're going to focus on understanding what effectiveness means, specifically as it relates to good and bad teaching. We're going to also look at how a student's background can weigh on what's going on in the classroom. We'll finally end our reading by looking at what goes into a post-conference. As you're also looking and listening to the information, we're going to also look at 2 short videos. The first video is looking at the impact of culture as a whole, and then the second video is actually a forum hosted by one of our authors, Sir Giovanni, talking about culture and specifically how culture can weigh on student achievement. As always, don't forget you have 2 assignments that are due this week. Make sure that you're staying current. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. For this week's assignment, complete the required readings, which consists of chapters 4 and 5 in Gale and Atkinson, as well as complete week number 6 reflections.
It is easy to take learning styles for granted. We do it all the time. Through our experiences at school, we all have expectations of how students should learn and how teachers should teach. However, in a different learning culture, the approaches of students and teachers to learning can be surprisingly different.
People will usually be comfortable with their familiar ways of learning and may be puzzled or feel threatened by alien ones, with perhaps a negative effect on learning. A greater awareness of cultures of learning by both students and teachers can produce positive outcomes for everybody. It helps us to create new ways of teaching and learning.
Let's explore 3 steps to achieve this. The first step is be aware of different expectations of learning. An international student in a class in another country can observe some unexpected behavior, but we need to be careful about how we interpret these differences. The student may think, "These students are just talking, and the teacher is not even teaching. I came here to learn from an expert, not from my classmates. They don't know any more than I do. I will sit quietly and try to listen to the teacher like a good student. Whatever we students say won't be as good as what my teacher says. Can this really be a good teacher?"
However, the Western teacher may also be concerned. This student is very quiet. She isn't participating with others, doesn't seem to be interested in learning. Perhaps she can't follow the discussion because her English is poor. Or maybe she has nothing to say. Is this a good student?
Both are rushing to conclusions and making wrong judgments because they have different cultural expectations of good teaching and good learning. So to avoid problems, we first need to identify what they each expect. For example, in the Chinese learning tradition, real understanding is achieved by deep thought and quiet reflection. You learn by listening, and you only say what you know when you know it, not before.
Students may feel they can't express a useful opinion until they know what teachers or famous academics have said. They will often memorize these views to show respect. However, in a British learning culture, understanding is achieved by talking and listening to others talk. Students develop their own thinking by giving opinions on what others have said, and are encouraged to express their personal views, even on great academic works. Step 1, then, is about becoming aware of our own ideas of teaching and learning, and to be aware that there are different cultural expectations.
The second step, develop a dialogue to learn about each other's expectations. Where cultural expectations of learning are so different from each other, there may be unfortunate consequences that are often left unexpressed. A student who is struggling to adapt to a new learning culture may be reluctant to speak up because if he seems to doubt the teacher, he is not showing respect. It is dishonoring the teacher.
International students and their teachers need to talk to each other to find out about their expectations of the student and teacher roles. Think about how you learn. What do you expect good teachers to do? What is traditional learning? Modern learning? What's the benefit of learning in this way or that way? We try to understand other people's experiences of learning from their point of view, rather than imposing judgments based on our own cultural expectations. A Western teacher says, "Oh, so you expect teachers to give you a well-prepared explanation? You listen, understand, and then practice the idea with some exercises. Theory before practice."
An international student says, "I see. As a teacher, you want me to talk and solve problems by discussion. You listen and help us later with the theory.
We can develop understanding and avoid problems by step 2, being explicit about expectations and past experiences of learning and teaching.
The third step, value the exchange of cultures of learning and learn reciprocally. Both Western and Asian learning styles and others, although very different, have developed over thousands of years to be highly successful. So in the modern internationalized world of education, we have much to learn from each other.
For teachers and academics in international contexts, developing a teaching style that accommodates different cultures of learning will extend their teaching repertoire. It's great for their professional development.
For international students, learning by active participation, learning by talking, extends their learning repertoire. Learning about cultures of learning is great for their future work. If a group is forced to adopt ways of learning which seem foreign or uncomfortable to them, without discussion or negotiation, this will likely create barriers of resistance and stress.
But when both students and teachers value alternatives, they impact each other. Both are teaching and learning. Both can learn from other cultures of learning. This is international and reciprocal learning. Synergy.
These 3 steps help us to make cultures of learning and teaching explicit. We talk about them and work towards cultural synergy.
If you have conversations about culture at school, my experience is that it hardly ever comes up. People are almost oblivious to it. Now let me tell you that if we don't pay attention to the notion of culture in a school, what do you suppose is likely to happen? Will it just go away? No, we all have a need for culture to be part of, and we're norm referenced, to have norms that we respond to and so on and so forth. If we don't pay attention to the norm structure of a school, then the students will simply invent culture for themselves. And the norms that they come up with are often problematic for us. And the only way and so we have to get in the trenches and declare war on the existing culture and get it renormed. You may not like my metaphors, and I don't literally mean them, declare war, but it's just to try to get the message across. The heart of leadership is to win the struggle over what will the culture of a school be like and what meetings will be important. You and I rely on culture of a school you and I rely on culture to provide the order and norms that are needed to give us a sense of purpose and value. Culture and connections are cousins. You really can't talk about connections without talking about culture, and culture without talking about connections. Since everybody needs to be connected, when they are left to develop their own cultures, I would call that wild cultures, because the kinds of cultures that they develop may be a problem for us. It's not appropriate or right or good for kids to help each other. We know the literature tells us, for example, that some minority groups don't do well in school academically because the norms to which they have to respond are anti-intellectual. And that if they do respond to them, their subgroup puts heat on them. Hey, look, what are you trying to do here? You're doing too well. If you want to, I may not use exactly these words, but this is the message. You're doing too well. And if you want to belong and you want to be cool, then you got to be like the rest of us. Just do enough to get by. And no, don't be that nice to the teacher, because then the teacher might get too confident and push too hard. So we've got to make sure that the teacher's a little bit on edge here and let her know that when we are obeying and being helpful, that we're doing her a favor, and so on and so forth. Where do those norms come from? Were these kids born with this kind of attitude? Of course not. In the absence of norms being worked on and put into place by us, the adults, they simply fill the vacuum themselves. And when they fill the vacuum themselves, we've got problems. Therein the principle, if we want to be successful in leading change, we have to be serious about connections, and that means serious about winning the culture